Well, Barbara, I guess it's 10 after, so you can get rolling. I'll mute myself, and the floor is yours.
Alrighty, great. So thanks for those of you who have come today, and maybe a few more people will join us as we go. As you know, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm not sure what that's going to do to my view of you, but let's give it a go. Oh, click share. I'm sharing my screen, so I can only see myself now. And then I need to do this and this. There we go. And now I can see nobody. Can't even see myself. So I guess that's cool. Thank you very much for attending. We are going to be talking about pitching today. And it's been a while since I've actually pitched to a group of entrepreneurs, so I'm very excited about this. I hung out in the entrepreneurial space in Ann Arbor and Detroit a couple of years ago and learned a lot about pitching, in particular investor pitching, which is not what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're really going to concentrate on the basics of business pitching, your business pitch, what we would consider that pitch that you use for pretty much everything. I wanted to start out, and I guess we can't annotate in Bevy, but I'm going to just ask you this question. What is a pitch for you? I just want some free association and some words. I'm going to go ahead and just write them down on a piece of white paper here to collect our thoughts. But if you can unmute yourselves, because I can't see the chat either. So go ahead and unmute yourself and just throw out some free association words that come to you regarding pitches and pitching.
30-second elevator ride.
Yeah, 30-second elevator pitch.
That's what I was going to say too. I would just.
Okay. What else?
Our story, who we are, what we're about.
Yep. Good. What else?
Not making it sound too pitchy.
When you say,
You know, I think everybody gets a little scared of what it's going to come out like if it's.
Okay. So is there some fear there?
I think when you first start pitching, yeah, you feel a little awkward at it, I guess is my best explanation of that.
Okay, we'll say scary at the beginning.
Yeah.
Not wanting to sound pitchy. What else?
30 seconds is all I got. I think about clarity.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then
Clarity.
it's followed by anxiety.
Right. That's what my scary was. More like anxiety. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that to an arrow to an anxiety there.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Connecting with the audience. Sometimes what we have to say or our pitch needs to change or adapt to who we're talking to. So being able to get a very quick understanding of who we're talking to and how to adjust for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was a great point.
Yeah, we're going to call that audience focus and connecting with that audience. Yeah, absolutely. That's really a super point. Anything else anybody wants to add?
I mean, I think about the KISS principle.
That's a pretty good list. We got most of the key things on there. So I'm going to share a definition with you next here. We've still got Verlander on this slide, but I actually don't know who the current Tigers pitcher is. The point I like to make about pitching, and one of the things I want you to understand at the beginning here is that I approach pitching from a communication perspective. So when I am coaching on pitching or teaching about pitching, I'm really focused on information getting through, messages landing. And because a pitch is short, it's a time-limited communication event, we need that focus. We have to be super focused on what we include. Corey mentioned clarity is critical. A pitch is somewhere in between informative and persuasive. And I'm going to show you a slide in a minute where we will position it on a scale of informative to persuasive. but it's basically a mini presentation. We talked about it needs to tell who we are, what we're about, what we do. It needs all of that in it, but it also needs to motivate your audience to take action. So this is the fine line, as I call it, between informing and persuading. And on this next slide, we'll see why defining that difference is important. I set this up as a bipolar dimension here, where we look at pure informing on one end and pure persuading on the other. If we think about just informing an audience about something, we're typically fairly factual. We might need to be objective about what we're talking about. It's somewhat impersonal because we're not maybe necessarily attached to the facts. And we use a lot of words and numbers when we inform people, particularly on slides. That piece is about basically visual support. If we think about persuading, there's a whole nother level of stuff that goes on. We think, we think about passion. We think about something being very personally important to us so that we generate emotion when we speak. And the best way to support that visually is with images. So looking at this difference here, we can see that if we, and generally communication is going to be somewhere on the scale here. It's pretty rare to do either one of these in a pure form. We might be able to think of some examples. But what I generally say about pitching is that we definitely want to be right of center. We want to be in this range, I would say, up here, toward the persuasive side of the scale, because we need people to take action. If we just inform, people typically don't take action on the basis of just objective facts. They take action on the basis of something that has triggered them emotionally. So we need to play to that emotional part of our audience as we create our messages. Another thing I want to say about a pitch is that it takes effort to create. And I'm sure you know that because you've probably been working on your pitch a lot and for a long time, and you'll know that it also morphs over time. But a pitch is not something that we just throw together. A pitch is really something that we need to construct. So that is something to think about. And that's where some of what I'm going to share today is going to give you some insights into the actual construction of that communicative event that needs to have a certain outcome. So the next slide is going to help us understand the different types of pitches. You mentioned the elevator pitch. This is generally a 1 to 2 minute pitch. It's usually used in networking type situations. It could be delivered to a group. I am always thinking about that BNI type group, which is Business Networking International, but there are lots of different versions of that. Or you could use your elevator pitch in a one-on-one conversation. In either case, you want that pitch to be the beginning of a conversation. And actually, that's pretty true about any of the pitches we're going to talk about today. A pitch is always the beginning of a conversation. Even an investor pitch, I would classify that way. And the key thing to understand about that is that you do not have to say everything in a pitch. One of the mistakes a lot of people make is they just cram as much stuff into their pitch as they can. And it actually limits clarity. It decreases clarity, I guess I should say, and confuses the person listening or your audience because they don't know what to grasp onto. So keep in mind the tenet that in a pitch in particular, less is always more. The next type of pitch we're going to talk about, or I'm going to show you, is the business pitch. This is that typical 3 to 5 minute, I would say, pitch. It obviously can contain more detail than just a 1 minute pitch. It typically will utilize slides and is delivered to an audience. So it's more of a one-way communication with Q&A at the end. But that Q&A is where the conversation begins. So we're still headed toward conversation via the Q&A aspect. With these pitches, that's what we're primarily going to talk about today. We're going to talk about constructing this business pitch. And I'm going to tell you what I consider to be the heart of that pitch. And we're going to talk about constructing the heart of the pitch. Now, of course, we have to mention the investor pitch. This is a very special animal. And if I teach or coach about investor pitching, it's very specific to that. One thing, generally investor pitches will be somewhere from 10 to 15 minutes, and that's just a rough ballpark. It could maybe be longer. 30% of your investor pitch is going to be the core of your business pitch. And that's one reason why getting your core straight and good and clear is important, because you're also going to be utilizing that in your investor pitch. The other 70% of investor pitch is obviously about money and finance. When I used to volunteer with a New Enterprise Forum in Ann Arbor, and one of the guys would say, your investor pitch is blah, 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 money, blah, 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 money, blah, 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 money. And that is somewhat true. The thing about an investor pitch is it has pretty strict content requirements. They can vary across geography and in different places. I know Corey knows that because he spent time on the West Coast, and there may be a different format for an investor pitch out there than there is here in Michigan. However, certain things need to be included. And so you're somewhat restricted to how broad you can go in those types of pitches. And the focus does want to be the investment opportunity, obviously. So if we look at just the difference between these two types of pitches, our business pitch is product focused. We tell people what we sell or what service we provide, and we tell them how it works. It's used to sell. It can be used to recruit talent. We use that business pitch in a lot of different situations. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really key to start there and get that pitch down. The investor pitch has that financial focus. And the basic message needs to be how you will make money. It could be how you're already making money. That's the best case scenario. Investors love to hear that you have traction and that you're already generating revenue. But in any case, you have to be very clear about what's in it for them. And that's really true for any audience. If we think about all of the audiences that we might present to or give our pitch to, we always want that focus to be what's in it for this audience. Where does my focus need to be for this particular audience? There are two main aspects to pitching, and we're primarily going to talk about the first one today, which is content. I find that people underestimate how long it takes to get your content really where you want it to be and where it needs to be. I've had a lot of people come to me saying they just really want to concentrate on the delivery of their pitch, and they give me their pitch, and I'm like, wow, this isn't very clear. There's a lot of work we need to do here to get to clarity. So we end up spending a fair amount of time reworking that content so that the message is coherent, the message resonates, the message is impactful. So today what I'm going to share with you primarily has to do with content. I'm going to share a little bit at the end about things that we think about related to delivery. We're first of all going to look at the elements of a business pitch. So I'm going to put these elements up here. The first thing that we tell people is what I think it might have been Josh shared or John, I'm not sure who said this, but who we are and what we're about. So this is our introduction. I prefer full name when we are pitching, just it's professional, and there could be a lot of Johns out there or a lot of Joshes. So we want to just give our full name and our title. It's important to state what your role is in the organization or in the company, your primary product or service, and then who it benefits. So this may be 3 short sentences. It could be lumped together all in one sentence. The problem with all one sentence intros is that our intonation can be a problem. We can tend to go up because for us, the phrase isn't finished. So I sometimes have people break it up so that their intonation will go down and they'll sound powerful. But that we'll come to that when we get to delivery. The next thing that we go to in our business pitch is the problem we solve. So this is critical, and we're going to talk about this in a bit of detail a little further on. It's a great place and really the best place to tell a story. That story may be your story. It could be someone else's story, a third party story. However, a story is a great way to paint a visual or an emotional picture of the problem that you solve. Your solution comes next. And I'm going to teach you today or share with you a way that I link these two elements of your pitch. This is what I consider to be the heart of your pitch, the problem you solve and your solution. And we'll get into how we make them very coherent and tie them together. You then go to your market, and in entrepreneurial pitching, there is a particular way that we usually illustrate and talk about market. We're not going to get into that too heavily today, but it's a fine point, I guess I could say. Another great thing to include in your pitch is something that you're doing right now. This gives a pitch sort of an immediate feeling. Right now we're launching, or we just launched last week, or in 3 weeks we're going to be launching, or testing, or doing whatever. If we're using those active verbs, it communicates that there are things happening and we're a happening concern. So you really want to use that, what we're doing right now, to give your pitch some life. The next thing generally in a business pitch will be some element of your team. You need to show the people, you want pictures, you want a brief bio that indicates why that person is doing what they're doing in your organization. So it's a 3 to 4 bullet point bio of each person that says, why is that person the CFO? Why is that person the CIO, for example? Their experience needs to show up there to explain to people why it's them. Then we come to the ask, and of course every pitch needs an ask, but that ask can vary by audience. When we think about a business pitch, we probably are not pitching for money. In the investor pitch, the ask is always money. But in this business pitch, I always encourage people to think broadly about what you could be asking for. You might be asking for referrals. You might be asking for resources. You might be asking for any number of different things. And this will vary by your audience. So when you think about that audience, think about, what could this group of people have that might help me get where I want to go? What could my ask be to this particular group? And then, of course, the last thing in our pitch is going to be a brief conclusion and the Q&A. Typically in pitching, the conclusion ends up being a reiteration of this information. You always want to leave people with your contact information, who you are, what that primary product or service is, and who you benefit. That's a great way to close a pitch. In presenting, other types of presenting, we talk about a summary, and this is typically your summary in a pitch context. I mentioned this briefly, but I want to make a point here that pitches are living things. They change really constantly as your business evolves, but they also change with audience, as we've mentioned. So what I generally recommend for people to have is a master pitch deck in which you have a wide number of slides for different audiences, and then you pick and choose the slides from that master deck when you give a pitch, when you know who your audience is. In some cases, you might have to create a new slide for a new audience. That goes in your master deck because you never know when you might be able to tweak that slide slightly for another audience. So this pitch is constantly evolving. It's constantly being improved. So never create your pitch deck and think you're done, because you're kind of never done. There's always something else that you can do. I'm just going to stop for a minute and ask if there are any questions. You know, unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
It's Corey here. I'm really excited that you mentioned that they're living things and organisms, because
yeah,
I know it's a frustration for a lot of people, but it's an important point.
Yeah, it really makes sense. And I think, Lynn, you have to leave in a minute, or maybe you're already gone. So thank you for coming.
Good eye.
I just noticed. All right, but listen to the recording because it gets better.
I will. No, it's been great. Really, it is. Thank you. And I will listen to the recording.
Great to
Thanks,
see you.
everybody.
Thanks for
Have a great
coming.
rest of your day.
Thanks. So I'm going to show briefly this slide, which is the contents of an investor pitch, what we would consider to be the elements you should have. What you'll notice is the first 4 points are things that are in that business pitch, and particularly that problem and solution. The rest of it is more talk about, you get into detail about your competition. It's that sales and marketing focus. Are you already making money? This is the place where you'll have your business model, all your financial information. So these are the kinds of things that go into that investor pitch. And I just wanted to show you that, even though that isn't our primary focus today. The next slide are what I consider to be some key concepts as you create your pitch. What we want in a pitch is something that's clear, impactful, memorable, and motivating. Those are the things that that pitch needs to be all of that in the end. There are some key things then that we can do to make that happen. And I call this the how. We're going to talk briefly today about keywords. Vocabulary is extremely important in pitching because it's time limited, especially in a 1-minute pitch. If that's all you have is 1 minute, you have to be very specific about the words you're using. Even in a 5-minute pitch, we want that vocabulary to be focused. And we'll see on the next slide what I recommend about keywords. The structure of a pitch is important. There is a basic structure that we talk about, kind of what I showed you in the contents of that business pitch. But when I talk about structure, I mean actually really evaluating that message to make sure that we are connecting the dots for our audience. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. It's very important to be consistent in the way that we explain things in a pitch. For any of you who have a technical product, a technical service, you want to be very consistent in the words that you use when you explain how it works, for example. There are probably more than one way to describe it, and you may know all those different ways, but if you change it up too much, it simply causes confusion. People aren't sure if what you mentioned initially is what you're referring back to now. So consistency in vocabulary, consistency in how we explain things is really important. We also need to think about repetition. The research says that people don't remember things until they've heard them at least 7 times. I've even heard 16 times. With distraction these days, you have to really repeat key points. So don't be afraid to say something exactly the same way more than once in your pitch, because that about the 6th or 7th time is when they're going to start to get it. So I know some people are afraid they'll sound like a broken record, but there are ways of weaving these things in so that you still keep it interesting. Story is very key. Someone mentioned this at the beginning. That is basically the way that we get to the motivation. We evoke emotion with stories. In a 5-minute pitch, you've got plenty of time to tell a really good story. In a 3-minute pitch, you might have to shorten that story somewhat. In a 1-minute pitch, we're going to just give the outline of a story. It's going to be real minimal, but there still may be a way that we can incorporate some of our story even in a 1-minute pitch. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that images are typically the best way to convey things that we want people to have a feeling about. Word slides like this one don't evoke much emotion. They really don't get anybody excited about much of anything. So in a pitch, we want to avoid word slides and really play to images and get creative with our images as well. So just a few words about keywords. That was clever. We want them to be specific. Keep in mind that people remember and react to specific information, things that are specific. I've had so many people say, well, I really serve everybody. It's not good to serve everybody. You need to niche, you need to segment, you need to think about who are those people I really do serve and what specific thing can I target with them. We need our language to be very accurate. I often say that in a pitch, there's no room for blah, blah, blah. That means cutting out small words, the words like then and that, excuse me. Sorry. Pardon me. I've got a little bit of some congestion going on today. So we want accurate language. As I mentioned, we want consistent language. We want colorful language. We want language that paints a picture. We need our language to be descriptive. I might have to get a lozenge. You might have to excuse me for just a second. And we want our language to be meaningful. I will be back in 1 minute. I'm sorry about that. I think it's a change of the seasons. I'm getting really congested in the mornings. So that's what I want to say about keywords. As you think about what you do and your business, start to identify that vocabulary that's going to resonate with your audience, that's going to make sense to your audience. I think that's really where we have to stay, is in this idea that our language needs to land with people. It needs to connect in their brain. So it needs to have meaning. I always tell people to avoid words like stuff and thing and bunch and all those words that really don't have a specific meaning. The next thing I'm going to share with you is this thing that I call reverse engineering. So it's structuring that middle part of your pitch, the problem solution, so that it has maximum clarity and impact. We need connection between the problem and the solution. What I hear a lot as I listen to people's pitches are very minimal problem statements. The problem is X. That's not enough to communicate about your problem. What you want is a very robust problem statement, because it will allow you to speak about more things related to your solution. This may look like a strange image, but it is a coat tree. And this is my analogy for helping people understand how they need to construct their pitches. The coat tree represents, it's the problem statement. So we want these little branches for each element of each of the solutions we want to speak about. The concept in reverse engineering our pitch is that we start with our solution and we think about every element of our solution that we want to communicate to our audience. What is it critical that they know about our solution? And we make a list. Then we go backwards and we make sure that our coat tree has a branch for every one of those elements of our solution. Every single one of those things that we want to be able to communicate about our solution has to show up in our problem statement. It has to show up in that problem part. That creates message coherence. In the brain of your listener, when you then tell them things about your solution, they're going to go, oh, right, so that solves that part of the problem. It creates coherence in the brain. It doesn't leave your listener to be doing this work themselves. And that's why we want to do the work for them so that it lands. And really, it's a very, very clear message. What I hear a lot is a very short problem statement and then this laundry list of things that your solution does. Well, if you're telling me all this stuff about your solution, that's fantastic, but I don't understand really why it's so important if you have not given me a robust problem statement. Now, often we want to have, the problem is where we have our story. So we definitely want to take that problem statement, everything, the template, I guess we would say, our coat tree, making sure of all the things we want to say in that problem statement and create a story around that. So we create a story about a person. Stories are best told with names. People actually remember names and they'll relate to the people in your story. So we are going to paint a picture of the problem we solve using people with names in a story. And we're going to communicate all of the pain they're feeling because of whatever it is that our solution can fix. So stories work really, really well. And the reason I like telling them early in the pitch is because then we can also weave them throughout the pitch. When you're speaking about your solution, you can say, so this is how we help Nancy. Nancy has XYZ problem. Our solution solves that for Nancy in this way. I'm working with a client right now. He's an entrepreneur in Switzerland. He's French. And his company, his new company that he's just bought the assets for, are going to be manufacturing platelets. It's called ex vivo platelets. And just yesterday, we came up with a story of a woman in France. He'd actually seen this in a newspaper, who is in isolation because in all of France, there was only one donor of donor platelets that matched her blood type and our X factor. With his product, she wouldn't need to worry about that because they're universal platelets and blah, blah, blah. But we're going to give that lady a name, a fake name, I think, and tell her story about how she's suffering. She's in isolation. They had to put a call out on Facebook to get another donor. And then he'll be able to talk about the fact that ex vivo platelets mean that you no longer have, the patient is no longer dependent on a donor. So that's just an example of how a story can lead you to a very dynamic link between your problem and your solution. Are there any questions about that? Silence. Okay, I guess not. So I will go on. The next part I'm going to share with you is a little bit about delivery. This is a very famous quote, and I used to think that I used to have the ratio in my mind. It was 70% how you said it to about 30% what you say. I've changed that over time, and I'm about 50-50 now. What you say is very important. The words you use, the way you structure your message is very important, but then how you deliver that content is also important. It also resonates with your audience. It has to do with memorability and your audience paying attention, basically. So I'm just going to ask this question, and again, you can take yourselves off mute to just give me some answers to this question. What is the impression that you'd like to be making when you're in front of that audience, when you're giving your pitch?
Professionalism?
Is anybody out there?
Yeah.
I can't see, so I don't know.
For me, this is Corey. I just want them to remember one thing.
Okay. That's a great low bar. That's excellent.
And then my smiling face.
There you go. Smile is good. For the others of you that are still out there, what else do you want? What's that impression that you want them to have of you? Jessica?
I would say a confidence in what we're saying in our story and how it relates to their problem, and confidence in that we know what we're talking about, that we're not just making things up or pulling things out of thin air.
Exactly. Confidence is huge. Absolutely.
And I would also probably add to that probably a sense of authenticity as well. We have all sat in those sales or pitch meetings where we know we're being sold, and everyone hates to be sold. And
So that's the thing about being pitchy, right?
exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess be able to communicate who we are as individuals and how our story relates to the story of the company we're working on, creating, telling that story, but then connecting it back to them and how we solve that for them and their situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else want to have a word they want to share? We've got confidence. We've got authenticity. Not salesy. Not like a used car salesman, right? That's the classic stereotype, I guess we should say, of somebody who's too salesy.
How about competence?
I generally refer to the impression we want to make as the 4 C's. And confidence is one of the 4. So credibility, and that's a bit linked with authenticity. I think we want people to understand that what we're saying is the truth and that we can be trusted. So trust ties right in with credibility. Sorry, I thought it was already up there. Competence. I think competence is something we want to communicate, that we know how to do this. We are the people to do this job. We are the people who can make this happen. So competence is very important. Confidence, as you said, is critical. We need people to believe in us and to believe that we can do what we say we can do. I do want to point out that there is a fine line between confidence and arrogance. So you do need to be careful. We want to be confident, but we don't want to be perceived as so arrogant that we are uncoachable. This is something that I actually learned working with NEF. Investors in particular will run a mile from someone pitching if they perceive that they can't be coached. And I've actually heard investors say this because they are going to coach you. If you get funding from someone, they're going to want a say in how you're doing things and maybe even make some fairly major changes. So as a person pitching, you need to come across as someone who knows what they're doing, has this great idea, is solving a big, hairy problem, but doesn't know everything, right? So there's that balance we have to strike in coming across confident, but also coachable. Corey, would you agree with that?
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. I've seen people go by so often in their pitches, and the room just changes.
Yeah, everybody all of a sudden wants to get away from them. It's that silence that you don't want to hear, right? Absolutely.
I was just going to say, I had an investor recently say that very same thing, that showing or presenting in a way that shows that we have the ability to adjust or move or be coachable and encourage different directions really means a lot to them. It means they have opportunity to have a voice and input, even in the direction of the company if needed be. So that was a critical thing they brought out on one of my pitches recently with them.
Great. I'm glad. Yeah. And the other thing is that often so one of the things we're going to talk about here in a second is that a lot of this is communicated non-verbally. And that's why delivery really does make a difference and really counts, because you can be doing something with your body or your face that you're not even aware, maybe sending that signal that you're not coachable or you think you know everything kind of thing. So that's interesting. It's not really maybe as much what we say as how we say it to communicate these 4 things. So let's take a brief look at some behaviors that can communicate confidence. And this isn't necessarily a full list, but I wanted to concentrate on a few things today. Eye contact is huge. Looking at that audience, looking at each person, making eye contact with them. This is the reason that you cannot read a pitch. You can't use notes. It just simply doesn't work because you need to be looking at people. This is where you get emotional contact. This is where you get that connection with your audience. So direct eye contact, not staring at anyone, but looking, glancing away, looking at the next person, looking away, but making sure you're including everyone in the room is critical. Speaking at a measured pace. not rocketing through your pitch. I think one thing about pitching, because it's time limited, people tend to want to speak fast. They're like, oh my gosh, I've only got 3 minutes. Yep, I gotta get it all in. Very big mistake. If you've only got 3 minutes, you want to have just enough content in there that you can get through while speaking at a reasonable pace. Speaking too fast communicates that you're nervous or that you don't want to be in front of the room. So a measured pace gives credibility. Another key thing is your intonation pattern. Downward inflection at the end of a phrase is more powerful and sounds more confident than upward inflection. And I will just demonstrate this in case you don't know what I'm referring to. So for example, if I would introduce myself, my name is Barbara Boldt. My company is Boldt Global. I'm an executive communication skills coach. That's up at the end of every phrase. And in English, that sounds tentative. It sounds not powerful. If I say, my name is Barbara Boldt, my company is Boldt Global, I'm an executive communication skills coach, you can hear the difference. It just sounds more sure. So if you know about yourself that you are a person who tends to go up at the end of phrases, you need to work on that. And it's not necessarily an easy habit to break, but you can get out, you can undo that. Adequate volume. You obviously want to be heard by everyone in the room. If you've got a mic, make sure you're holding it up to your mouth, because often mics don't pick up if you're holding it down too far. And then we come to a couple of things about posture. I am a proponent of the still body. That doesn't mean you cannot move, but it does mean that you need to move intentionally. So everything you do at the front of that room needs to look like you mean to be doing it. And if you're fidgeting or rocking or moving around and what I call wandering, that's non-intentional movement, and that distracts your audience. Whereas intentional movement, planned movement can actually attract. So keeping that lower body still, hip distance, feet hip distance apart so that you're nice and solid. Don't be off on one hip or just very, I call it relaxed military posture. Some people find extreme. However, you don't want to be distracting from the words that you're saying. I call it getting out of your way. Don't be doing things with your body that people are going to be watching instead of listening to what you're saying. The same goes for gestures. We want our gestures to be firm. Obviously, in this virtual world, you have to raise your gestures up into the screen, which I can't even see what I'm doing right now, so I don't know how I'm doing on that. But you count things on your fingers. You can create distance with your hands this way. I just saw someone speaking this week who did a really nice job of talking about things with their hands. They were diagramming things with their hands. You want your hands to be working for you. You want them to be supporting your verbal message. And then the other thing that can really communicate confidence and credibility is the use of pauses. Pauses are it adds a bit of drama sometimes. You generally want to pause either right before you say something that you really want your audience to be listening for, or right after you've said something you want them to remember. So those are the two best places to plan a pause. But pausing really allows things to sink in, and it forces you to slow down as well. So if you struggle with speaking fast, start working with pauses. This next slide is about behaviors that can sabotage the 4 C's. It's basically the reverse of what I've just talked about. But the one I like to call out here is the repetitive use of words or phrases. Things like so at the beginning of a phrase, or which is a sound, a very annoying sound that we all need to get rid of in our discourse. You know is a bad one because you're telling them something they probably don't know. So to say, you know, and some people say it a lot, is not useful. And then I know I have a tendency to use the word right as a kind of checking with people kind of thing. You can use some of these every now and then, but if you're using them repetitively, they become distracting. So you want to work those words out of your speech. We also don't want to tie too many of our sentences together with and. It's best to create a new phrase for every idea. I taught English for a while, and we construct our phrases in English with a subject, a verb, and an object. And our listeners, the minute we say we do X, they tune in. If we say we do this and then we do that and then anything connected with the and gets lost in the middle. So try to break up your phrases so that you're not connecting. Occasionally it's absolutely valid to use and because two ideas are related, and that's fine. But think about what you're connecting. You may find that you're connecting ideas that would be better off if they stood alone. The concept of likability is one that I set apart from confidence. Corey mentioned a smile. Smiling is important. We don't want to grin like idiots. I think the best example I usually give of smiling too much are the videos they use on airplanes to tell us what to do in the safety video. In the event of a water landing, they're grinning through this whole scenario that they're telling us, which is terrifying, and it just looks wrong and sounds wrong. So do think about your smiles, but you want to smile at the beginning. You definitely want to smile in the Q&A. It's very important to be warm and welcoming of the questions. And I do a whole big thing on Q&A. As I'm sure Corey's seen this happen, and maybe some of the others of you too, you can give a relatively decent pitch and then really screw up the Q&A. And in the Q&A is that place where you need to really be approachable. And that's open body posture, never arms crossed, staying open. There's just a ton of stuff that goes into a good Q&A that we don't have time to get into today. But we do want to make sure that we keep our energy upbeat, and that if we do struggle with nerves, we work on that so that we can get past that jittery kind of feeling. That's all I have. Are there any other questions I can answer for you? I have a couple other slides, but I just want to answer questions before I go to them. We've just got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to just continue. But I will be happy to offer a copy of the slides from today. I do publish a newsletter once a month, and I'm going to start writing about pitching. I haven't up to now, but that is one of my new topics that I'm going to be blogging about. And my e-newsletter is basically a combination of some blog posts. So if you're interested in receiving the newsletter, please write to me at the email address you see on the screen, bb@boltglobal.com, and I'll be happy to add you to my send list for the newsletter. You can also go to my website and book a call. boltglobal.com is my website, and you're welcome to have a conversation with me. I always love to speak to people and find out what their needs are. But the real thing I wanted to share today is that I am running what I'm calling the 5-Day Perfect Pitch Challenge, again, starting on October 1st. This will be my second challenge. I did one at the end of August, and it was really fun. I'm making a few changes and improvements in it, but basically this is what it consists of. There are 5 one-hour live sessions spaced over 7 days. So it starts on a Thursday and ends on the next Wednesday. There is something that happens on Saturday morning that's selective. Select people can come to it. It's a feedback session. And then nothing on Sunday. But I find that it gives people a chance to digest some of the content that I share if I put that weekend in there. These are the things that we'll be covering. So essential pitch content, that keyword list, we'll be diving into that a bit deeper. We're going to do the reverse engineering technique or exercise where you look at your solution and then tie it back and create a more robust problem statement. We'll be talking about some techniques that compel your audience to take action. So looking at that motivation piece. And then we'll spend a little bit more time on delivery and help you diagnose aspects of your own delivery that might need some work, that you might want to improve. We can identify what you feel you're really good at and maybe what you want to work on. So those will be the 5 days. As I mentioned, it starts on October 1st. It will end Wednesday, October 7th. It's going to be from 12 to 1 each day. So it's basically a lunchtime, lunch and learn kind of thing. The cost is only $55. It has a much greater value. If I were training someone or coaching someone, I would be charging a lot more for it. But I'm using this as a way for people to get to know me and build trust with them and find out how I can help you further. I'm going to offer you the bonus today of registering. If you register by tomorrow at 5, I'll throw in a free 30-minute consultation on your personal pitch that we can do after the challenge. I've listed the URL here that will take you to the Eventbrite page for registration, but you can also reach out to me by email, and I'll be happy to send you that in an email if you want to receive it that way. So on that note, I will finish finally. Thank you so much for those of you who did come today. Corey, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very informative and very helpful.
I'm glad. I'm going to end my show here so I can see people. It's driving me crazy.
It's kind of weird when you can't see people's faces.
It is weird. I've had that happen. All right, stop sharing. There you are. Great. Yeah, that's a weird thing. I was interviewed for a TV show on Monday, and it was the same thing. I couldn't see them. And I still haven't seen the link either, so I have no idea what they look like. But I hope you found that useful. You got a sense of how I come at pitching.
Yeah, and as I said, this recording is going to be available on our on the same event link that everyone used to join the event, sign up for the event, and then also, since you are offering the slides, if you want, Barbara, I can put a link on that same page so that people can download a sort of like like an accompanying guide.
Sure, that'd be great. So I just send you that.
If you can send me that, and then I'll throw it on the event page with the.
Okay, that'd be super. Yeah, we've still got a couple weeks before it takes place, but I'm hoping to get a good number of people in that challenge. It'll be a lot of fun, and it's great to have a mix of people because people see things you might not see. If you stay too much in the same community, you get the same kind of feedback all the time.
Right. There's value in stepping out.
I know for one, I will be in that challenge. My team and I are actively working on our investor pitch, product pitch, and we've got hours upon hours into developing it, and we can do a lot more refining, that's for sure.
Excellent. I look forward to that, Josh, and I'll look, my intention after the challenge is to take people into a master class kind of thing where we really work in small group, and I can give a lot more feedback, but we could also do one-on-one. I mean, if you guys are really in that phase, I'd love to work with you. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'll send you an email with my contact information, but the deeper I dig into this, the more I understand the complexities and the nuances that have to be understood. You can't just go in. I've been in business development for 15 years. Doing a sales pitch is one thing, but having a conversation with executives is a totally different thing. And learning to adjust is becoming important. So yeah, thanks. Yeah. Very informative.
Well, and it's looking at how do you shift your message, and it's a matter of what generally happens when I work with people one-on-one, like I'm doing with this guy in Switzerland, is that I have to learn your business really well. You have to train me up in it. You have to talk to me about it so that I really get the coherence that we're going for. And it's very odd. I have this, I call it a superpower, but I hear what people don't say. When you're talking to me, I'm going to hear the gap. When you're telling me stuff, I'm going to go, but what about that? Or how did you get from here to there? Or is this accurate? And so it is a process. Fauzi and I, we've had 5 sessions now, and we're just getting to the point of story because he's had to teach me about platelets. I've had to learn about, which I have sort of a medical background because I was a dietitian for a while, but I learn about your business and then I really help you get that message down. And I love it. It's really fun to help people be able to really express that, what they do in a way that's going to resonate with people.
I think what struck me the most is I watched a company create an idea that had no real value, but the CEO managed to continually raise hundreds of millions of dollars round after round, and they still haven't produced a single product 10 years later. And it comes down to he knew how to tell a story. And that's part I'm realizing is almost more important than even the product you're pitching. It is.
It is. Telling a story about how somebody benefited from that product is golden.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. And some people are very good storytellers.
Yeah.
I suppose we could say some people are very good bullshitters too.
Yeah.
But I've been listening to the podcast about, is his name Adam Newsom? WeWork. The guy who got drummed out. And that was initially part of his magic, was that he could tell a good story.
A whole bunch of fluff, nothing there.
It turned out to be a lot of really BS, but interesting story, because look at all the money he raised. He raised a ton of money and people thought he had a really solid product. And in the background, it was just smoke and mirrors.
Well, I forget her name, the lady she's my age, out of California, that medical startup.
Theranos?
Yes. Yeah. I watched a documentary on that and it was the same thing. It was a whole bunch of, she probably in the beginning had a really good idea, but it's got out of control and then just kept telling the story regardless. It kept raising round after round.
Well, and you have to ask yourself, why do people keep giving money?
Yeah.
Is it,
I don't know.
Well, they gave it, so I'll give it. And I think sometimes it gets to be maybe you know this, Corey, from the California scene. Is it just like nobody wants to be left out?
Yeah, there's some FOMO, but then there's also the amount of actual due diligence that goes through like vetting a deal is surprisingly brief, low, and
Really?
given trust. Like it's often like college interns from like some university that's an analyst, and they're like, yeah, and they're not domain experts because the investors, they're out, they're golfing, they're looking, they're trying to buy the next Tesla, like they don't
really care.
And that's and I wanted to make a point about how much it can benefit for having someone. As coach is such a loaded word, but to have like someone on your side to help you with your voice, your message, communication, your style, and make it authentic to you, having that partner really helps founders and entrepreneurs, especially. I've seen so many people skip 6 months ahead in fundraising because they don't have to learn those lessons. That 6 months is how many presentations to how many investors, where it's not like they're forgotten or lost contacts, because you can still give them updates. And of course investors love to see you grow. But why waste that time when that investor on the first pitch might be the one that wants to invest with you? And then as founders and entrepreneurs, we have more skin in the game than if we were like, say, a channel sales manager or employee, whatever. Because if we're an employee, like, oh yeah, I'll just get the next company,
Right.
As an entrepreneur or founder, sure, it's kind of a numbers game, but it's really more like life and death, like almost every day. Because it's like we're like, this is the best day ever, and then at 3:00, oh no, this is the worst day ever, and then at 5:00, you're like, oh no, everything's fine. And
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, I'm glad you said that, Corey, because what I have found is that sometimes what is not working for someone or tripping them up is something that's not obvious to them. They don't know they have this little characteristic, or their eye contact is off. Sometimes people look up when they're trying to think of something, or it's really small, subtle stuff, but it communicates. It's communicating something.
And your co-founder is not going to tell you. They're not gonna.
Well, and so often the feedback is, oh, wow, that was great. Well, okay, there were parts of it that were great and there were parts of it that were really good, but my job is to tell you what wasn't great or what didn't work, so that we get to the place where it works. And that's why I like to work with people who are super serious, because I have also had a couple of clients. A couple of years ago, I worked with one guy who's very successful, and he did get investor funding, and I think his business is doing really well now. But I couldn't tell him anything. He was determined that, that what he was doing was the way it should be done in the right way. And even the small, he actually never pitched to me. I never saw him do it because he was so convinced that he did it well. And I'm like, well, you might. And I'm going to tell you that he would never take the time to actually stand there and deliver. And so we parted ways. But I also have had the situation where people are not considering what story do I tell? And is it the story that audience needs to hear? Or does that audience need to hear a slightly different story? And so, I'm glad you realized, Jeff, that there's a lot to it.
One thing, I don't know if we have time, maybe it's for another conversation, but having spent years doing the presentations in front of people, right, I pull a lot out of the audience. Now, every presentation I've done in the last 6 months has been on a computer. Now, I've done hundreds of webinars for the years, but it's kind of was in the past a tool that needed to happen because schedules didn't work out. Whereas now it's becoming something that is almost requirement. And I'm missing that. We have a little bit of the video, but you still miss a lot of that personal. How have you overcome that? And any investors, all my investors have been either phone calls or webinars because no one's taking face-to-face meetings, especially in the very beginning, at the pitch level. What's your thoughts on how to, I guess, adjust to this new way of doing things?
Yeah, it's hard. I agree with you on that, because especially in that relationship building situation, being in person makes a huge difference. But I think what you can do, you have to simply be more personal as you're delivering, or it's like a warmth that you bring. And making sure that if it's permissible, you're using their names. Like, Corey, what do is this resonating with you? So probably more back and forth, trying to build that in. Then usually these pitches are one way. People just listen. I think trying to get a little bit of feedback verbally from your audience as you go through might be a good tip.
Okay.
The other thing I think is that the people, if you just deliver, they get lazy. They stop listening and they tune out. So if you're constantly circling back and saying, just wanting to make sure that makes sense. Anybody have any questions? Or, trying to build more interaction in the virtual context is what I would recommend. Okay.
Because I know for me, I have multiple monitors that you guys can't see. So I got emails popping up and things going on, phone going off. And if I'm just in the zone doing my story, that makes a lot of sense. Just constantly connecting from that verbal feedback.
I found a lot of success in props and building context, especially really good in small groups, where if I and then I also try to really hard to make the meetings are we doing a coffee? Is it a happy hour? Is it a walk? Sometimes I'll ask investors to go on a walk. I'll be like, hey, let's get out of the office together and let's just go for a walk. And then we're both on video together, and I'm walking through a park and they're walking through whatever, and then we get to it gets that level of you personalize it, and you force them to empathize with hey, we're here together, and there's some challenges here or whatever. Or when I'm with my daughter, I always preface the meeting with, just so I have my daughter with me, and I'm probably gonna she's gonna be on the call.
Right.
It's not a surprise, and then when that happens, then there's that empathy again, and then these little things, they don't realize the psychology, but if I say it's a coffee meeting and I have coffee, I get to talk about the type of coffee, and how do you take your coffee, all that fun stuff. I've even gone as far as I will send them a $15 virtual Starbucks or a gift card for a coffee house that they said they liked, or that I've I Googled coffee shops around,
Yeah.
Menlo Park. And I was like, oh, here's a shop like really close to your office. Maybe you like there. And I know you work in your office. Here you go. Go grab a coffee with me. So those touches that just, people are like, what?
Yeah, that's very good information. That's really good ideas. I like that.
Yeah, and that tears them away from their screens as well.
Yeah.
So that is a great idea and I think especially with the investor community, creating that link of personal connection is super important. It might, if you're just giving your business pitch to inform some people about your project or whatever, it might not be as critical, but when they always say that investor relationship is like a marriage. So, you gotta like each other.
Yeah, could be sticking around for a very long time. I'm sure some very hard conversations. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Corey, when you say building context, how do you do that? What do you mean by that?
So the context of, and I meant more about, it's just about creating like what this meeting is for.
Okay.
Like here, like is it just a virtual coffee to get to know one another? So I'll even say, hey, thanks for joining me for this coffee. Like here's, I've got mine, blah blah blah, and then I set the expectation, right?
Okay.
And even if it is for like a second catch up or like a check-in or a monthly update, a lot of people have this assumption, especially on the digital realm here, that, oh yeah, we all have the calendar invite, we all saw the agenda in there,
and people don't even read it or look at it maybe necessarily. Yeah, for sure.
That part can sound a little formal, but I just like setting, okay, here's this, and then I cover do I have a hard stop, or I'll say, I don't have anything at 1 o'clock, so I'm okay if we go over, and then I'll ask them. So then we have that sort of like, okay,
everybody knows what they're doing,
minutes or whatever.
And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's
like some like Zoom 101 type stuff, but it's critical, right? So,
yeah, it really is. It really is. So Cal said he was headed off to donate blood. I've understood how important blood donation is, actually, working with this guy. It's been fascinating. 100th
pint. Congratulations. That is
that's a lot of blood.
Yeah, I had the benefit of getting to know Cal pretty well. He's an awesome dude. So
cool.
If you do make it on this side of the state for like a live event, when we're allowed to do that, Cal's been a big supporter of our chapter. So
excellent. Well, I plan on coming over when we're allowed to. When we can get groups together, that'll be great. But actually, like the guy I'm coaching in Switzerland, I've obviously never met. The coaching, you can do this on Zoom. It works pretty well. And what I like about the delivery part works well on Zoom or a platform because you can record automatically. It's easy to record people and then they play themselves back. The bad part is I can't see much of you. I can't see the whole body. So from that perspective, delivery is a little limited in the virtual context, in the virtual space. But thanks for hanging, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara.
Great, Josh. I look forward to connecting with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And Corey, thanks for setting this up. I signed up for Start Craft Grind like a long time ago. I'm finally starting to get around to connecting more with local. The problem is I still work a day job. So I still have an 8 to 5 while I'm getting this off the ground. So it's very hard to do all of it simultaneously. And I have daughters graduating high school this year. So there's a lot going on, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So
yep, I'd love to hear where you're at with everything.
Yeah, I'll shoot you an email too. It'd be nice to connect at some point. I'd love to learn more about Startup Grind and how I'm finding. I believe network is everything, and how you connect with people is everything. So starting to have those relationships and conversations, I think, will be important.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks. Good to see everybody. Barbara, thank you so much for your contribution.
You're very welcome. Yeah, and you've got the recording, so maybe you don't need to do it again. But I'm happy to interact.
All right. Sounds super
fun. Thank you. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice meeting you as well.
Bye-bye.
See ya.